Ladies and gentlemen, Marx and Engels are customarily depicted as admirers of Abraham Lincoln, resolute foes of chattel slavery, and courageous champions of Negro rights, Negro equality, and Negro freedom. There is scarcely an iota of truth in this interpretation. Publicly and for political reasons, both Marx and Engels posed as friends of the Negro. In private, they were anti-black racists of the most odious sort. They had contempt for the entire Negro race, a contempt they expressed by comparing Negroes to animals, by identifying black people with idiots, and by continuously using the opprobrious term nigger in their private correspondence. If you're black and you're a socialist, make sure you listen very carefully to this, because it was the concept of freedom that exists among the people in this country and the document known as the Constitution for the United States of America that really set the black man free. You've been lied to for so many years. It's unbelievable. You're still being lied to. Since Marx and Engels wrote to each other in German, they inserted the offensive English word instead of using the correct German word, which is spelled N-E-G-E-R. Since neither revolutionary theorist had much interest in the Negro, and still less in the fate of Africa south of the Sahara, the quest for Marx and Engels' true views on the Negro has required quite a diligent and prolonged search. It has been rewarded, if that is the correct word, by some revealing expressions of gutter race hatred of the lowest sort. Not only for the Negro race, although that's what we're going to concentrate on tonight, and we'll cover the others on other nights, they also hated Jews and Slavs, and as a whole, what they called the common man, or the masses. Marx wrote Engels on July the 30th, 1862, that, quote, the Jewish nigger, LaSalle, end quote, was fortunately leaving London toward the end of the week for his native Germany, adding, and I quote again, it is now absolutely clear to me that as both the shape of his head and his hair texture shows, he descends from the Negroes who joined Moses' flight from Egypt, unless his mother or grandmother on the paternal side hybridized with a nigger. Now, this combination of Germanness and Jewishness with a primarily Negro substance necessarily creates a strange product. The pushiness of the fellow is also nigger-like, end quote. Now, if you just tuned in, folks, I am quoting Karl Marx in a letter to Friedrich Engels that was written on July the 30th, 1862. Quite outside of the offensive tone of the letter, it illustrates Marx's tendency to twist and invent evidence to express the envy and hatred he felt for his successful contemporaries. Judging by surviving photographs, ladies and gentlemen, LaSalle rather closely approximated the German Nordic type. Marx, on the other hand, was so swarthy that he was called the Moor by acquaintances ever since university days. He had a thick, flattened nose. One observer described his complexion as dirty yellow. Nobody in his right mind would have thought Marx's physiognomy German. The official Prussian police report, a document which attempted accuracy for purposes of identification of suspects, reads, quote, special recognition signs, A, in his speech and appearance, reminds one somewhat of his Jewish origin. B, is clever, cold, and resolute. End quote. While he was certainly not a Negro type, Marx's appearance was more Negroid than LaSalle's ever could have been. Nor was there anything to Marx's theory that the Jews of the Exodus had hybridized with Negroes en route to the Holy Land. There were no Negroes in the area. Again, we have a case of Marx inventing historical theories for malicious purposes. Marx's speculation that LaSalle's ancestors had mated or intermarried with blacks was fanciful. The passage quoted is interesting both as an example of Marx's paranoid hatred of people, particularly Jews, who were conspicuously more successful than he was, and as a revelation of his secret loathing of the Negro race. Let's look at another example. On August 7th, 1866, Marx wrote Engels about an exciting discovery he had made. The find was a pompous and preposterous book by a French ethnologist and racist crackpot named Pierre Trémaux, which anyone well-versed in science and scientific method would have dismissed as total rubbish. Marx, however, hailed Trémaux's work as marking, quote, a very significant advance over Darwin, end quote. Marx's infatuation with Trémaux's race theories will be discussed in more detail on another night. Let's suffice it to say at this point that Marx wrote Engels that Trémaux had proved that the common Negro type is the degenerate form of a much higher one. Actually, Trémaux had proved nothing. He had made the extraordinary and, of course, unsubstantiated assertion that the Negro race was not a product of evolution, but of human degeneration. His actual words were, quote, the backward Negro is not an evolved ape, but a degenerate man, end quote. A finding that, in Marx's opinion, made Trémaux superior to Darwin, if you can imagine such a thing. Both of them were off the deep end. On October 2nd, 1866, Engels replied to one of Marx's enthusiastic letters about Trémaux with a long refutation of that charlatan's theories. At the moment, we are only concerned merely with what Engels had to say about Trémaux and Negroes. As before, when I use the word nigger, it means that Engels inserted the offensive English term into the German text of his letter. And for those of you who may be just tuning in, this is not my words, ladies and gentlemen. It is the words of Karl Marx in the correspondence between Karl Marx and his mentor, a very rich capitalist, Friedrick Engels. You see, I'm laying bare the lie, the socialist lie that Marx is some kind of hero. Marx was a dismal, abject failure at everything that he ever tried. He was jealous, resentful, and hated anyone who was successful. He created the social premise that the world owes somebody else everything, because that's the only way Marx could ever get anything. He lived his whole life off of the charity of Friedrich Engels. Now, here's what Marx had to say in his letter. The stories about the nigger, Santa Maria, and about the transformation of whites into Negroes are laughable, namely that the traditions of the Senegal niggers are worthy of unconditional belief precisely because the fellows don't know how to write. The way the fellow explains how we Rhinelanders on our Devonian transitional rocks, which have not been underwater since long before the era of coal formation, did not become idiots and niggers. He will perhaps show us in his second volume, or else assert that we really are niggers. Another incident gives us a clue to Marx's true feelings and thoughts about Negroes. Marx's old patron, Charles Dana, approached him with the proposal that he write articles for an American encyclopedia. Marx was assigned subjects beginning with the letter B. This was a welcome source of income for the always debt-ridden and impecunious revolutionary who couldn't hold on to a job or a nickel and never made much in the jobs that he had. Marx wrote a violently intemperate biography of the liberator of Latin America, Simón Bolívar. Dana said that he was disturbed by its partisan tone and asked Marx to give his reference sources. On February 14, 1858, Marx wrote Engels about the matter. He considered Bolívar, quote, that coward, that vile and miserable swine. He added, Bolívar is a real Soloque. The reference was to Faustin Elie Soloque, a black former slave who through a combination of ruthlessness and native ability, had seized power in Haiti and had himself proclaimed Emperor Faustin I. Marx's second daughter, Laura, fell in love with a young medical student named Paul Lafargue in 1866. Lafargue was of French-Cuban origin. He was apparently one-quarter Jewish, one-quarter Carib Indian, probably less than an eighth Negro, and the rest French. Although Lafargue was a socialist and one of Marx's greatest admirers, Marx was not at all pleased. In fact, he was very angry with the proposed marriage until he discovered that the bridegroom-to-be was the only son of a wealthy West Indian planter whose father planned to settle a large sum on the couple. I can just see him now trying to figure out how to get his hands on a portion of the sum. This not only provided Laura with apparent financial security, ladies and gentlemen, but it opened up a new source from which Marx himself might borrow money. Marx decided that Lafargue was a handsome, intelligent, energetic, and gymnastically developed fellow with an exceptional talent for medicine. This is what he said publicly when his son-in-law was around. Lafargue's exceptional talent for medicine may seem dubious to us, since he believed that the main cures for disease were alcohol and electricity. He proposed Pasteur's discoveries and sent Marx articles that maintained that germs were spontaneously created, that Pasteur was wrong. Whether he was a potential medical genius or not, Lafargue, in due time, abandoned medicine for unsound business schemes and, of course, socialist politics. Lafargue seemed in many ways an ideal son-in-law. He was comparatively rich. He was a socialist. He was a man who ran political errands for Marx. He was a professional, and by Marx's standards, a coming man in medicine. Now, don't get all this wrong, folks. This did not prevent Marx from telling Theodore Cuno, a fellow socialist who was immigrating to the United States, that one of his daughters had contributed to, quote, solving the color question by marrying a nigger, end quote. In addition, Marx habitually referred to Lafargue as the little Negro, negrillo, or as the gorilla. This was unadulterated race prejudice. Lafargue was a man of distinguished appearance and aristocratic bearing. Jenny von Westphalen, Marx, characterized Lafargue as a true nigger for whom, quote, the sky was always full of violins, end quote. That was Lafargue's sister-in-law, Marx's other daughter. Laura, Lafargue's wife, bore a second child a year after the first. On January the 17th, 1870, Jenny Marx wrote Engels that she hoped her daughter would practice reproductive restraint and not produce, quote, 10 little nigger boys, end quote. I have already quoted the unpleasant remark which Engels made in 1887, 3 years before his death, that it was highly appropriate for Lafargue to run for office in a Paris district that included the zoo, since, quote, in his quality as a nigger, end quote, he was, quote, a degree nearer to the animal kingdom than the rest of us, end quote. I bet there's a lot of socialists out there writhing around in their seat, gnashing their teeth. And it won't do you any good to deny this, because the original letters between Marx and Engels were preserved and reproduced in a book in the Soviet Union. And it's on record. I've already given you enough to throw the man right out with the dishwater, but I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to make sure that he's buried 6 feet under where he belongs. He belongs out of all of our hair. Most, if not all, ladies and gentlemen, of these insulting racial slurs were made by Marx and Engels behind the backs of Paul and Laura Lafargue. Whether this made them more excusable is for you to judge. In fairness to Engels, it should be pointed out that when the Lafargues lost their money, he supported them financially with numerous loans, just as he had supported Laura's father for most of his life. And later on, he supported the rest of the Marx family. Actually, their name wasn't Marx at all, as you'll learn later. Until his dying breath, you see, Engels supported Marx's children and grandchildren whenever they were in need, which was most of the time, just as he had supported Marx himself. You see, the world is going to base the government upon an abject failure who created all this socialism nonsense so that he could get something for nothing from all of those whom he envied and hated because of their success. And that's what socialism really appeals to. If you really examine the socialists that you know, you'll see that they're scared to death of life. They're afraid of life. They're not really successes at anything. And they've got to be supported. They've got to be taken care of. To put it very bluntly, somebody has to change their diapers constantly so that they can live in this world. Otherwise, according to the laws of nature,